Hi, I'm Asad Ali, and today I'm going to talk about media skewing and social psychology. Now, I'm sure everybody has heard of media skewing and social psychology before, maybe together, maybe separate, but we're going to go in detail today about it. We're going to talk about why it's a problem, and we're going to also give some viable solutions for the problem. Now, here are two young boys pictured here above. If you want to take out a moment and just write down two adjectives at home, you can go ahead and do that. Alright, so the adjectives that I came up with when I wrote it down were youthful and adorable. Actually, those are the two most answered. I at random picked 25 people to answer the question and give me two adjectives of what they thought about this picture. Now, what they did not know, and what you guys at home didn't know, is that these two young boys were actually killers, and they murdered a toddler. They abducted him from the mall, and they beat him to death, even though they had several chances to let him go. So you could see how easily that you at home, and as well as many other people's perceptions, were altered. So now, let's talk about what media skewing is. It's used to attempt to alter its viewers' perceptions about the story based on how it's presented. Examples include propaganda, fear-mongering, and media bias. It's also used to push the agenda of the company, whether it be liberal or conservative media outlet, for their own self-interests. So they used many different tools, to change the perceptions of their viewers. Voice inflection, they can make it deep, for an ominous mood, or maybe higher pitched or faster for a positive story. The melody of music, anything up tempo is going to lead to a positive reaction. Anything, slower and more ominous is going to lead to a negative reaction. The on screen color scheme, brighter colors will induce happy feelings, and darker grays or blacks, might induce a negative feeling about the story, as well as the mood portrayal. So the way the person is acting on screen, you're gonna believe that if they're acting happy, the story is probably happy, and it might make you feel happy, or vice versa for sad and negative. All right. So the adverse effects. The spreading of false information occurs. It also alters the perceptions, which is the main point and the reason that media skewing even exists. It also leads to an uninformed general public, and it inhibits change, which is probably the worst thing about this, because without change there will be no progress. It also incites fear and promotes hate. So I'm going to give you guys a couple examples of that a little bit later. I'm going to talk about the mere exposure effect. It's a psychological phenomenon by which people tend to develop a preference for things merely because they're familiar with them. In social psychology, this effect is sometimes called the familiarity principle. Uh, a social psychologist, Charles Goetzinger, he hypothesized that the mere repeated exposure of the individual to a stimulus object enhances his attitudes towards it. The mere exposure is a condition making the stimulus acceptable to perception. So, in layman's term, the more often that you are to see something, the more comfortable that you become with it, the more likely that you are to have positive regard towards that, whether it be an item or a person. So Goetzinger had a person come to his class each day for a semester, covered from head to toe in a black gown, where only the person's bare feet were showing. At first, the covered student was alienated by his peers, but after a while, the students accepted him and even befriended him, thus confirming the hypothesis. So I know we've all gone through this before, when you were younger, especially the new kid in the class comes in, everybody kind of picks on him a little bit, but then day after day you get to know him more. Eventually, you befriend him and he becomes part of the circle. And it happens in a lot of aspects of life. And it's definitely, a big part of media skewing and how it relates to social psychology. So a very, something fresh on everybody's mind still a little bit will be the Trayvon Martin case. The conservative outlets and the liberal outlets, they portrayed him very differently. So the liberal outlets, they wanted people to have positive regard when they thought of Trayvon Martin, because they are pro gun control, and the story had a lot to do with that, as well as racism. So the liberal outlet, they put this picture out because they want you to have positive feelings about him. You know, he looks like a carefree kid, doesn't look like a troublemaker. The conservative news outlets wanted you to have the opposite feeling, so they released this photo, which, you know, I never want to speak ill of the dead, but it, you know, it portrays him as kind of like a thug, maybe a troublemaker of sorts. And, you know, it's just not fair to Trayvon or to the public, because, you know, which story do we believe? Do we believe the one showing him a happy-go-lucky kid, or the one that's portraying him as a thug? And I think that that has a big part to lead to why there were riots, why some people felt strongly that George Zimmerman should have been acquitted, and it's all because of how the media skewed the story. Another huge mere exposure and media skewing effect would definitely be in politics. So the picture that you guys see on screen, it depicts President Obama in bed with all the liberal media outlets, and they're upset because he keeps talking about that Fox that he can't get. And of course, we know which Fox he's talking about Fox News, because the conservative outlet, they constantly are badgering him. You know, they're making him out to be the bad guy, and any problem that happens in the country, they right away want to push it onto Obama. Now, we do see the opposite effect in the liberal media. They're saying, you know, one man can't change everything. One man, it's not only up to him, it's not his fault. But, you know, when the elections were going on, they did definitely made the public believe that this one man was going to be the one to bring, you know, the hope and the change back to America. And we could definitely argue that it's a big reason that he got elected, because of the situation of the country and the chance to change. And you know what, him being an African American, it definitely, you know, fed into the liberal point of view even more as far as the change was concerned. So I think that if we don't change alter our perceptions, that we're going to wind up being totally skewed. So I'm just going to show you guys how misinformation in this country is predominant, and here we go.
Usually side with. So I decided to conduct an experiment today. We sent a camera crew out on the Hollywood Boulevard to ask people which they thought was better, the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. Now, as you may know, Obamacare is just a nickname for the Affordable Care Act. They're the same thing. But lo and behold, we found people who did not know that, and that didn't stop them from weighing in on it.
We're talking about health care today, and which plan do you support, Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act?
The Affordable Care Act.
And what is it about Obamacare that you do not like?
I just think that there's a lot of holes in it, and it needs to be revamped. I think
and you think
hasn't been thought out.
You think the Affordable Care Act is a better plan than Obamacare?
Better, but I'm not happy with that either.
What do you agree with, Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act?
I'm more sort of towards the Affordable Care Act, but I'm also very sympathetic for people that don't have the ability to have proper medical insurance.
So the Affordable Health Care Act is still a better option than
Yes.
Obamacare?
Yes.
And why do you not agree with the Affordable Care Act?
Well, I think it's not really available for all.
So the Affordable Care Act is more affordable than Obamacare?
Just the name says it all.
Right.
You know, obviously right there, that's a perfect example. You know, the Affordable Care Act, you know, the name just says it all. So it just shows you how the misinformation that these people received, and, you know, I don't really blame it on them. I blame it more on the media. I blame it more on their peers, because most likely they had heard that these two things were different, and they were unaware of the fact that they were the same thing, just a different name. So now, finally, I have some solutions for the problems. Get news from as many sources as you possibly can, including different countries. You know, getting your news from different sources is definitely your best bet. You know, they say there's always the wrong side, the right side. There's always, you know, the truth, the half-truth, and the whole truth. So, you know, you got to hear everybody's perspective, put the pieces together, and figure out what the whole truth is. You know, you got to see it from every way. You can't just pick one perspective and stick to that. Protect the internet. I definitely think this is the most important solution that's mentioned. The internet gives us a free-flowing access to information 24/7, 365, and as long as we protect it, it's getting much harder for the media to skew stories because their credibility is on the line. Next, we have be a fact checker, not a fact believer. So if your friend tells you something, you hear it on the news, you see it on TV, do not take it at face value. Just because it's on the news, just because, you read it in a news article does not necessarily mean that it is true. Go out, read different articles, get everybody's point of view, check the facts, and make sure that before you believe something that it is actually true. And finally, do not spread or allow the spreading of false information. Now, I don't expect anybody to go and punch someone else in the face because they're telling a lie, or, they're giving out information that might necessarily be true because they heard it on the news. But if it's viable, let the person know. That might not necessarily be true. With today's technology, like we talked about earlier, the internet's always available, always accessible. So if you want to fact check something, everybody has a smartphone these days. It's very easy to do so. I just want to thank everybody who took the time out to watch this, and you have a wonderful night. Happy holidays.